Welcome to another episode of Guiding Light. I'm Sierra Larson,
I'm Jenna Carson.
and today we are interviewing Jenna. We are so excited to hear more about her story, her experiences, hear about all of her wisdom. Um, we're recording this after we talked to Chris Berlin, and where Jenna mentions a little piece about kissing her boyfriend. So I'm sure listeners, after hearing that, are like, wait, what? Jenna has a new boyfriend. And so that is just such an exciting topic in general. But before we kind of get into that, we are, um, a lot of listeners have been interested to hear more of Jenna's story with her experiences with the divorce and with her love life. And not to get too personal, but just a little bit more about what Jenna has learned through those experiences and her healing journey and what we can share with y'all today. So thank you so much, Jenna, for being willing to just give our listeners just more of your story and your journey.
Of course, of course. And just so you all know where we're going, today we won't talk about boyfriend. Today we're going to start kind of at the beginning of this journey with marriage and divorce and dating after divorce. So we're planning 4 different episodes. So this episode is going to discuss my experience with divorce, and my hope is that it will help you all who are going through divorce or who have gone through divorce or who are contemplating divorce. And over the next 4 episodes, we'll move from talking about divorce to healing after divorce to manifesting the right dating partner to dating after divorce. So that is our trajectory.
Yeah, and we are so excited to also, in this kind of series that we're
Yes.
doing, have Allison Armstrong on the show. She agreed to come and give us her expertise. She is an amazing relationship expert. I don't know if you've had any exposure to her. If not, she wrote the Queen's Code, which you have time to read right now before her episode. It's like incredible. So we're so excited to have her too as a part of the series. So we just want to give y'all a heads up on everything that we have coming up. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So really a 5-part kind of relationship focused series.
Yeah. Okay, Jenna, where do you want to start with your story? Where is like the part of your story that you would say that like we have to start here because this is the beginning?
Well, I think just my growing up in a marriage-oriented culture in my religious tradition. So, in my church, there is a huge emphasis on the importance of marriage. And so there was this deep cultural focus in my life of the importance of the marriage institution. And so I had this understanding from a young age that it was really like my destiny and my plan and path to be married, and that I believed that marriage would complete me. I believed that it was necessary for me to be a complete individual and to fulfill my spiritual potential. And so I always had this on my mind, and I married relatively young at age 23 and really believed that I was marrying the person that God wanted me to marry. I had this view that I was being led to marry this individual, and I still can't really deny that. It just really felt right at the time, and I think maybe it was right because it's part of my growth and development. But what happened in that marriage was there was a lot of, I think, miscommunication and misunderstanding, but also, frankly, emotional abuse. And a therapist I saw pointed out the emotional abuse of my husband at the time. And I was actually so offended by this that I stopped going to see her. I could not even believe that he was emotionally abusive. Like it just, I didn't believe it. I really defended him and justified his behavior. And a lot of that was um, intricately tied to this idea I had of his religious authority. I really believed he had this special access to God as a man, as an ordained man in my religious community. And so for 4 years, I wrestled because the problems were there from the beginning, from the honeymoon. The damage to my spirit and body was very deep. He was not physically abusive, but you can't not have bodily harm when you have emotional trauma. I mean, it's really tied, and I just was so out of sorts. My whole being was very out of sorts, and friends watched me decline. And I actually had a friend who said she felt like I became a zombie. Like she was like the light in your eyes, like it was dimmed, and you just looked empty. And what was so hard for me and why I couldn't get out of that marriage is I believed, well, I made this covenant, I made this promise with my husband and with God, and I'm not a person who breaks promises. And I did ask him a couple years into the marriage for a divorce, but he kept saying, I'll change," and that did not happen. And when we finally divorced, it was interesting because the blame in his view was still on me. And so there wasn't I don't think he was able to accept responsibility for the way he had treated me. And when that marriage ended, I was devastated in a sense, like just so sad that the dream of this, eternal marriage, this family, children, there was a great loss of the dream and the hopes that I had come into this marriage with. And at the same time, there was a great relief, just so much relief. Just like, oh, like I can breathe again. And I felt free in a sense that I could be at peace and not be tormented emotionally. And I took a year to heal. I really did. I had finished graduate school. I had been through a pretty extensive, very long miscarriage that lasted many weeks. And then later in the year had divorced, and there had just been a lot of emotional load on me. And so I stepped away from chaplaincy. I house sat and I taught yoga and just had an orientation to heal. And that was hard because not only was it hard to face the judgment of divorce because I felt like people were judging me. And a lot of that was probably my own projection, my own insecurity, right? But I felt that. But then also, people would make comments about, like, oh, why aren't you working? People didn't see my house sitting and my teaching yoga as real work. And I had some people concerned about me. But I also had a mentor tell me, Jenna, you, you don't listen to the opinions of the peanut gallery. Take time to heal. And that was the best gift I could have given myself because my whole worldview had been knocked out of alignment. My whole sense of worth, marriage and everything, and promises to God, like that tumbled down, right? I had broken promises, had been through the divorce, and I
Mm,
rebuilt. I rebuilt though.
yeah. When okay, I just want to jump in a little bit. Sorry, this might be
Yeah.
my therapist
Yeah.
hat
Jump
coming
in.
on.
Jump in.
But you're talking about promises and you're talking about, um marriage and covenants. And so when you say I had broken promises, um I want to be careful with that
Yes. Yes.
because from what you've just said, there are promises made in marriage. And one of those promises, and a lot of what we read, from Christian perspective in the Bible, is husbands care for your wives.
Mm.
And it talks so much about, the nurturing and caring for the wives. Love your wives like Christ loves his church. Like, just so much love and compassion, and a lot of the promises made in marriage is to do that from him,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
him. And so I want to be really careful for you and other women out there that feel that have divorced and feel like they failed or they feel like they've broken this promise. And um, the understanding I have personally is if that person isn't doing their side of the promise, which is to love and care for you and to take care of you and not to harm you emotionally, spiritually, physically in any way, you know, that abuse, if that's happening, I don't really believe it you leaving is you breaking that promise. I believe that it's that promise was broken as soon as the abuse came into it.
Yeah.
That's a if we look at it as a contract, that's an infraction, right? Like
Yes.
that breaks that with those things.
Yeah.
And it isn't as black and white as I think I'm making it sound, but I just want to be careful about that because I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of women think that they failed when they leave
Yeah.
abusive relationships. I should be more I should be more patient. I should be more willing to I let, you know, them change, or I should be should like don't do that, you know. It's you have a responsibility to care for yourself too, and to make
Yeah.
sure that you as a child of God are not being harmed and
Yeah.
abused. And I don't think that there is enough being said about that in terms of women, because we are very much shamed
Yeah.
when we say, you know, when we set boundaries sometimes and just say,
Yeah.
no, I will not be treated like this. And if you continue to treat me like this, I am not going to participate. And that is absolutely okay. You have every right to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So sorry, I just wanted
No,
to
thank
jump
you.
in there because
Thank
I think that
you.
was really important.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I want to clarify when I said broken promises, I mean, the spouse and I, we had come together and promised to create this life together, right? And that was broken and that was we exited that. And I don't have shame over that. I used to have shame. And if I could go back to my former self, I wish I would have left the marriage earlier. Um, a good friend of mine said, Jenna, why? How would you let someone treat you like that? How? She said, for 4 years, she said, maybe, maybe you should have given him 1 year, but not four, and I look back and I just did not have the strength to leave because I was so concerned about the marriage vow, right? And I remember a church leader of mine wisely said, God does not want you to be miserable. Now, my church leaders would never tell me what to do, which is very good. But they would say, Jenna, you've got to make a decision, like eventually. But I will say, this is very vulnerable, but I have no shame in sharing this. And again, this came after 4 years of persistent, consistent emotional abuse and severe emotional abuse. Severe, not only cruelty to me, but laughing at my pain. One time I was injured. I had fallen repeatedly on my tailbone. I later had to have a procedure where a doctor actually um, went in through my anus and moved my tailbone back into place. But I remember my husband was laughing at me. I was falling, I was in pain, and I was crying, and he was laughing. So severe emotional abuse for 4 years, including when I was miscarrying our child and had to drive myself to the doctor because he wouldn't go with me. Um, at the end of that marriage, what finally broke us was the love had died. The marriage was dead. It was gone. When you stonewall and abandon me when I'm miscarrying your child, it that was really the death of my affection for him, which is gone. And I had a period of deep, deep vulnerability, and I emotionally developed feelings for a mentor of mine. And this is a period of 2 weeks. And I confessed that to my husband. There was no physical infidelity. There's no kissing, no. But I confessed to him, yeah, I have feelings for this person, and this is a huge flag for us. Like, we have to fix this now. Like, but he proceeded to blame me and he told me I cheated on him. And that was when he said, we're getting a divorce. And so he could turn his abuse back onto me and blame me. Whereas I actually think I had deep integrity confessing I have these feelings and we need to do something. And sadly, that was the story he told his family, that I was unfaithful to him. And I remember his cousin like wrote me on Facebook and accused me, and I said, "You've heard one side of the story." And so I share this very vulnerably, but again, with no shame, to tell women everywhere, this is what happens in abuse. Th- The person will continually turn it back on you and try to force a feeling of guilt and shame. And I just wish I could have set a boundary earlier. I wish I could have walked out. And the truth is, I so was so concerned about God being disappointed in me that I could not leave. So I beg anyone in an abusive relationship, if that is you, please know God is not shaming you. God treasures you. And if your husband isn't treasuring you or treating you with civility,
Or spouse.
yeah, sorry, spouse, could be wife. Yeah, wife. Um, Yeah, so if I have one regret of that time, it's that I couldn't leave before, and he had the final say. He ended it, and I thank God that he did. I thank God he said it's over. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I work with a lot of women who have had just extreme forms of abuse and trauma and in relationships. And I think one of the things that we work on in therapy is I should have known.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
should have known.
Yeah.
And our last episode with Chris Berlin, he's like, stop shooting yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's like my, I love that term, even if it's a little crass, but my response to that is always, how could you have known?
Yeah.
Who you were then, knowing what you knew, the belief systems that you had at the time, how could you have known to do anything different?
Right.
And I think there has to be grace for our past selves because we are looking at our past selves from a wiser and higher vantage point, from a healed perspective or from with a hindsight bias. And so when we look at our past selves, we need to look at them with grace and say, "Oh, poor child, you didn't know.
Yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
baby. Like you didn't know." And that's okay. We know now. I'll make sure you're taken care of from here on out.
Mhm. Mhm.
We know now how we need to be treated. We won't accept that anymore. I'm so sorry that you went through that, but we're not doing that anymore. And we know
Yeah.
better now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like we need to talk to our past selves with that grace. Because
Yeah.
I guarantee you that's how God sees us. Oh, poor
Yes.
child, like you honey, you didn't know.
Yeah.
You didn't know.
Yeah. I was doing the best I could every day of that marriage. I was doing the best I had with the knowledge and coping mechanisms I had at the time.
Absolutely.
And when I married him, I was going, I had deep faith and belief, and yeah, I had a lot of blind spots, but that was 23-year-old Jenna.
Yeah.
So there's growth. And for anyone listening, whether you've been in a marriage for 1 year, 4 years, or 20 or 30 or 40, it's not too late to leave an abusive situation. It is not too late. And there is so much life ahead. So much life ahead. I often work with women who are in these situations, and my heart just just aches, and I want to beg them, like, I want them to run. But as a chaplain, it would be irresponsible of me to tell people what to do. And so I really try to ask questions and help people come to their own meaning, just like a therapist did with me, and my religious leaders did. Um, I think if my religious leaders would have understood the extent of the abuse, they probably would have been a little more direct with me. But again, I was shielding my husband at the time. So people in your life are it's not likely they're going to say, leave, get out, but seek the peace, right? Seek, seek support, seek peace. So,
Yeah. And I do want to touch on a little bit, and you don't have to, this can be purely from a professional standpoint and you're
mhm,
not directly from your story, but just
mhm.
from the professional side of um, like you were saying that you were telling these stories and your therapist goes, no, that's emotional abuse, and you weren't able to kind of recognize it as that.
Yeah,
What are some things that our viewers and listeners can look and kind of assess and say, is this emotional abuse or not? Because a lot of times, especially if you've grown up in a household where this was normal, really thinking like, everyone does this, or this is normal, or this is not a big deal, kind of minimizing it, or being afraid that like maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion, maybe
yeah,
it's, not that bad. So what would you say signs or things to look out for or just to be aware of? And
yeah.
maybe not definitive, but what are some things to be aware of when it comes to emotional abuse?
Yeah, I'll speak to my experience and then Sierra, I'd like you to add as well as our therapist in this conversation. So, for me, stonewalling. So when a partner refuses to communicate with you for extended periods of time. So in my situation, it started with several hours on the honeymoon, and then it extended to days at a time, and then weeks at a time. And you can't have a marriage when a partner is ignoring you. Like that's what another person said to me. This isn't a marriage. He won't talk to you. He ignores you. So that's stonewalling, and that's a form of manipulation and punishment. So it's emotionally abusive when a partner is purposefully punishing you, so withholding affection, whether that's physical affection or emotional or even just basic words, laughing at your pain, denying that you're in pain, telling you that you're making things up in your head. And I would also add, this probably doesn't fall under abuse, but is a huge red flag. If a partner is like denying any way that you feel, or deny, just unwilling to support, like just not willing to be in a relationship with you. Like that's a huge red flag. Yeah, so those are what I experienced. And there are others. So Sierra, what other emotional abuses? Um,
Mm. I'm thinking right now, currently, I'm thinking about some clients that I've had that have experienced like financial abuse
mm,
as a form of like, I think it's like its own thing, but I think in this conversation, like withholding, being really um I can't think of the word in English, like tacaño in Spanish, but like being really cheap, like
mm,
being really stringent with like how much you can spend or withholding things that the person needs, like having to ask for hygiene products or something if they're not the primary earner, or working outside of the home. So things like that that can be abusive, not making decisions together, one person deciding absolutely everything about where, your life, your lifestyle, not having a say in that, feeling, um, I guess I'm thinking more of like the primary person, like income earner. If there's one that is earning more income and the other person is staying home, having a lot of demands for the person working in the home, about you know everything that's going on in the home, being very demanding about all of that, and requiring way more than what one person should need to do in a day,
yeah,
just and then not being sensitive to that, and then I'm also thinking about language to other people about the spouse. So, and this can go, a lot of times I think people are listening are thinking more male to female abuse, but I think this is one that can go either way of how you speak about your spouse, like teasing or putting down your spouse either publicly,
Sarcasm.
sarcasm, publicly or privately,
Yep.
are all things, you know, and these things might happen on occasion and they're not okay. Um, if they are happening on occasion and it's something that's discussed, it's something that's vocalized and you work through it, absolutely, that's like ideal. If it's something that is discussed and you're dismissed, time and time again, that you are not heard, things don't change, that person, generally, I would say in a marriage, both of you should be striving to make changes to love the other person in the way that they need to be loved.
Yes, and you desire that. You
Yes.
have joy in that. So, like a little preview with my boyfriend that I'm dating right now, I'm just amazed at how he just desires to please me, not because he's a people pleaser, but he loves to do good things for me and to grow with me. And we talk about how we want to grow individually and together. And there's a lot of mutual support, a lot of mutual support. Certainly did not have that in the first marriage. And Sierra, another thing I'm thinking of, and I'd like to insert a trigger warning here, because I want to be very sensitive about how common this experience is and how a lot of our listeners may have gone through sexual assault in marriage. So that is abuse when one partner is not consenting for another partner to proceed. That is sexual assault. So I think again, a lot of times in marriages we will justify the behavior of the partner when in reality there it's unacceptable. And so yeah, for any of you going through that, we urge you to seek the help of a therapist. We urge you to seek support, and we want to be here for you as well if there's anything we can do as chaplains. But Sierra, I want to kind of pivot back toward my story. Unless is there anything else we need to say about the
No, I think that covers it, and I think you're absolutely right. It's it's seems counterintuitive to some people that in a marriage you need consent. Like, oh, I married you, that was consent. Like, no, like you
Mhm.
still need consent within your marriage.
Yeah,
If the person is not willing, they still have the right to their own person and their own bodies. So that is very important. I'm so glad you brought that up.
yeah.
So yeah.
And I want to, so Sierra, I've told you, about this first marriage. Now there's a part two to this, which is over a year after the divorce. I was feeling very healed, and had so much hope still to have a family. Really wanted a family, and felt so excited because I started dating a friend of mine who I had known for several years and deeply trusted. And I believed that he was like my person. Like I thought it was kind of perfect that we were in this time and space to date each other. It felt again very guided. And we dated for over a year and then we married. And I was just so happy. I really had not, at that time in my life, had not experienced so much happiness in a relationship. He treated me very well. And it was so different from the first marriage. And there was a point where we thought I was pregnant and we were both really excited. We could just kind of enjoy this really safe relationship and feel that good things were happening. At least that's what I was feeling. But 5 months into the marriage, he told me he was leaving. He told me he wanted a divorce. And I begged him to tell me what I had done wrong. My immediate thought was, this is my problem, because I've been through one divorce. So I was thinking, like, what am I doing? And he insisted it was not me. He insisted it was him. And I couldn't believe that, like how could it not be me if this man is leaving me? 5 months in, and we met. He agreed to meet once with a therapist because we did premarital counseling. We did all the steps, Sierra. We did all the things, all the quote, right things that you do. We read the dating and the marriage books, and we did premarital counseling. And, we had the blessing of our therapist and our family. And people just thought we belonged together. Like, I remember friends saying, you just you're good together. And when he agreed to meet once with our therapist that we had done premarital counseling with, after the conversation, the therapist told me, Jenna, he has an attachment disorder. And I'm like, that would have been nice to know before I married him. But he said, well, it was marriage that brought it out. That's what brought the fears out. And so I kept thinking he would come back. I really thought like if I let him go, he would come back to me. I thought he just needed time and space to figure things out. And the therapist said, I can help him, but he doesn't want to be helped. And so I was in denial, really. And he left me physically. I was in another state, and I've never felt so alone in my life. Never felt so devastated. And we proceeded. He did not come back, and he sent me divorce papers, and I signed them. And that was the worst thing I've ever been through. It was a deep betrayal to marry someone and then 5 months later for him to walk out. It was the deepest betrayal of my life and the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I didn't want to admit how painful it was. I didn't want to admit that this hurt me so deeply. But I have no shame in sharing that it hurt me deeper than anyone or anything ever has. And it took me years to heal from that. The pain kept deepening. I kept thinking, this is going to go away. And instead of going away, it just got deeper. And I dreamed about him. In my dreams, I was trying to, be back with him. And I would be happy in my dreams because we'd be back together. But then I started dreaming that he married his ex-girlfriend. And it was right. He did. He went on to marry his ex that he had dated before me. And then I dreamed that she was pregnant. And she was, and they had a baby together. And it just, I mean, I have no words for that. It was awful. And through that time, I just really had to lean on God because men had disappointed me so much, right? My marriages had disappointed me. All of my dreams were just gone. My dreams of family and things. And I thought I would never, after he left, I was like, I'll never find love again. I really believed that. I was 31 and I'm just like, I'm done. I'm really done. And I want to say it took about 3 years, 3 whole years to just start feeling like it didn't hurt so much. And there were moments of forgiveness along the way. There were moments of deep grace. One of my favorite moments, probably one of the most spiritual experiences of my life was like a week after finding out he was marrying his ex. His mom told me this. Um, I was in Westminster Abbey in England I had gone to England to speak at a conference and I went to a service there and we were reciting the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And we repeated these lines, and suddenly I just felt this divine grace, like washing over my body, filling my spirit with ability to forgive him. And it didn't mean it was okay. It didn't mean that what he had done was okay, but I could forgive. And I just have such a strong conviction that God can help us heal and forgive. And my life now that I've been through this is so much more beautiful than I could ever imagine. Like, I'm the happiest version of myself. And when I work as a chaplain and hear people's stories of betrayal and loss and sorrow, I can empathize because I've been through these things in my own way. You know, my grief is not the same as anyone else's. Everyone has their own unique grief. But because I have lost so much and because it just made no sense to me, when people are telling me their stories that make no sense, I can feel deeply what it feels like to not understand why something happens and to not have the fulfillment of the dream. So, despite all these painful experiences and two very painful experiences with marriage and divorce, I would not trade it. It's just my life. It has been my path, and I really found happiness on my own and total complete fulfillment with God and me alone. And then when I was least expecting, the new this special new relationship came into my life. We'll tell that story later. But there was wholeness before I met him. There was an understanding. I am complete. I am whole. I am happy. I love my life. And now this special partner has come into my life. And regardless of what happens with him, whether it leads to marriage or not, I know that I'm exactly where I need to be in life. And I'm so grateful. So those are my divorce stories, Sierra.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There's one thing I feel led to touch on.
Yeah.
In both stories, you talked about feeling like praying about this person.
Yeah.
You talked about it feeling right in and trusting in being led, what we would call by the Holy Spirit to move forward with this. And I think sometimes, that when I work with people on trauma, we talk about stuck points. It's like a thought that we get stuck on that is causing us pain. And that sometimes can create the stuck point of, God, why did you let this happen? Or God, why did you let me? I prayed about this. Why didn't you warn me?
Mhm.
All of these things. And I think one of the thing that's coming to mind for me in these situations and a lot of situations is, especially in relationships, is that your partner has agency.
I think sometimes people are just doing the best that they know how.
Yes.
Like I
Hmm.
truly believe both of my exes were doing the best they knew how. And
Hmm.
the more I've learned about their past, and their formation and development, um, the more I'm like, okay, there's a depth here and there's some unresolved issues. And I think with the second spouse who left so early on, that's what's more so a mystery to me because he kept saying, I need to be alone, but then he eventually remarried. And so that's a disconnect to me. But regardless of what's going on with him, like, I do believe he entered the marriage with like desires to continue to love me. And I think there's just a great mystery in why humans hurt each other and how deep we're able to hurt each other. But I also think with God, my understanding of how God guides me is a lot different now. Like, um, I don't know, I think God can only guide us to the extent that we're like able to be guided. And so I just
Mm.
think that like 23-year-old Jenna couldn't see red flags that there might be abuse in this relationship, and later when I remarried, I don't know, like I guess I didn't I wish I would have known how to value myself more to see because there were red flags too with him. Like he wasn't as committed to me when we were dating as would have been healthy. Like I could have seen some red flags there, but I didn't yet have that ability. And so I think sometimes like in my own life I've put too much on God, like, oh, God should tell me X, Y, and Z when I believe the reason I have this life and this body is to learn for myself right and wrong. And I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but I guess my point is like like I'm trying to co-create this life and work and partner with God, and God's letting me have some pretty hard experiences and use my agency to make some decisions that, yeah, haven't been happy, right? I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if that
no,
makes
no, no.
sense. Like,
It
yeah.
it totally does. And like you're saying, I guess that's yeah, my point too is like agency on both parts.
Yes. Yeah. Because, like,
Yeah.
if I had have known how to value myself like I do now, never would have married either of those men. I would have been
Mhm.
like, goodbye. We're like one date. No, next, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like maybe not. That's probably an exaggeration, but it would have been clear to me, like, okay, but I've grown. I've grown. I mean, it's been over a decade now since I first got married, and wow, I'm a different person. And one thing is for sure is like in this new dating relationship, he and I have both expressed to each other we're really grateful for the hard things that each of us has been through, because those experiences have formed us into who we are today. And both he and I feel like we're in such a healthy place to find a healthy partner. And some people have that early on, like Sierra, you and both of my sisters, very happy marriages. Sometimes you get it. You just get it right. And that's great. And I celebrate that. I also had a therapist say to me, a lot of it is luck. And at first I didn't like that because I'm like, I believe in God, I don't believe in luck. But I think she's saying there is this fortune that some people, it just works. And I think that's why we can take away some of the shame surrounding divorce. It's not a failure. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And just because for some people it works doesn't mean that they're better. Someone who got married at whatever age and has been married for 4 decades, it doesn't mean they're better than me who has been divorced twice. It's just we have different learning experiences.
yeah. And I will say, you kind of bring up me and my marriage. Like, I think I've learned a lot of the same lessons, like you're saying, like like how to value myself, um, what I'll tolerate, what I won't, signs and things with commitment. Like I've learned those lessons not in the same way. They're
Yes.
expensive lessons to learn.
Yeah.
I paid that price. Like I've paid those prices,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's not um I don't there's more than one way to learn those lessons and they did come with regrets and difficulty and things. But I learned them and it also led me to my person.
Yeah.
It prepared me for my person in a big way. So maybe you are out there and you have never been married and um you're feeling like, you've had hard things that are y- hindering you in some way from being married, or you're only been married once. But I think there are a lot of lessons in pain and mistakes and choices and everything. There's so many lessons, and wisdom is expensive.
Yeah.
It is
It
very
is.
expensive. Somebody paid the price, even if it's not you. If you're listening to us and our stories today, like someone paid that price for that wisdom. And so, um, the two sides of that coin are, the increase that we have from the wisdom and also the pain that came from learning the
Yeah.
lesson.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so if I think if you've been through just a hard relationship in general, divorce maybe, maybe not, or feel like there have been hard things in your life that have taught you something, I invite you to just maybe journal or reflect on the lessons that you've learned from the hard things,
Yeah.
and approach it from a place of mindfulness of what is, what was, and um, also hope for what can be, having learned this lesson, what hope for the future. I'm so excited to talk about like Jenna and this new relationship because the way it came about was just so miraculous. Like not only like the relationship, but just Jenna and I our relation, like our
Yeah.
friendship in general.
Yeah.
It's just like we've talked about how miraculous it is. Um, but I remember, and maybe, this is a teaser for this. I know you guys are so excited to hear the story. Um, we're like holding out on you. But I remember, I think it was like maybe a day or two before this person was introduced to one of us, and then how they were introduced. But I was talking to Jenna, and I was like, Jenna, like the next time you date someone, they better value you, and like they better just like treat you better than anyone else has ever treated you. Like I was just like big sister, like protective,
Yeah.
um but Jenna was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like she was like, absolutely. There was
Hmm.
no like, well, she was like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're gonna treat me well. And I
Yeah.
just love that confidence in her and her growth, and everything she's learned to just become this like amazing, wonderful woman, and spiritual, just giant of a person. And I don't know, we love you. We all
I
love you,
love you.
and you are just such a light. And yeah, so many more stories and amazing things to come from your story. But yeah, I think just thank you for your vulnerability, because I think there are so many people that feel, especially in our faith tradition, that feel so much shame
Hmm.
from the things that they have experienced, having been divorced, or whatever it is. And to just say, like, we all have stuff. I feel like we come to church and we hide so much of this.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we feel like we have to hide it, because that's what the nature of shame is. We feel like we have to hide, but there are so many people that are going through similar things, and you don't have to go through it alone. That was the whole point of, a community of Christ, is that we walk through life together, not judging, but supporting each other in these journeys. So I encourage you to find
Yeah.
support, either with us, with people in your faith tradition, with the groups, whatever it is, find support, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable with the people that you can trust, because they probably have had similar experiences and can support you as well. So.
Yeah, and even if it's not a spiritual community, because we want to be inclusive. We know that we talk a lot about our own faith journey, right? And those of you who don't have a spiritual community, find any community. There are grief support groups, a yoga community, a meditation community, a sports community. There are, I truly believe that life has a way, I would say God has a way, we could say the universe, we could say life has a way of sending us help, sending us helpers, sending us angels. Sierra has been an angel in my life, and so I also add my invitation to Sierra's to find your angels. And if you don't feel like you have them, maybe take a minute to meditate and just ask yourself, who is the angel I need right now? And I believe you'll be led. So thank you so much for tuning in and hearing my story. Next episode, we'll talk about healing after divorce and what I did to heal and some recommendations. And stay tuned for more episodes from Allison Armstrong and from me to talk about relationships. I'm Jenna Carson,
I'm Sierra Larson.
and we hope you follow the peace.